Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR, and we've got a topic today that I'm stealing from an SEC podcast. They did this, and I thought it was brilliant. Thought it was a great idea, and I thought that you guys might like it. It did really good numbers on their channel. So let me know what you guys think. Comment, subscribe, like, do all that stuff. Let me know what you guys think. Do you want more stuff like this? Is it is it way too early for these kind of predictions? I'd love to know. I'd love to know. Today's video will be 5 teams in the Big Ten who will improve their record, and 5 teams in the Big Ten who will worsen their record. We always talk about, did this team improve from last year? Did this team get worse from last year? It's really hard to tell when you just look at the schedule because, like, for a team like Indiana, who this year had a pretty easy schedule in the Big Ten, they played predominantly lower the half Big Ten teams. That's not so much the case in 2025. They're going to be playing a tougher schedule. So let's get to the 5 teams who will improve their record. Let's do the good news first. All right, let's do the good news. Team number 1, and this isn't me ranking anything. I'm just going to go alphabetical. So alphabetically, team number 1, Michigan. Michigan went 7-5 this year, and this next year they'll most likely be starting Bryce Underwood. I mean, Mikey Keene came in as a transfer, so that could happen. I tend to believe it's going to be Bryce Underwood. I made that claim in my predictions video, so we'll see. But yeah, Bryce Underwood probably going to be starting here, and honestly, they got 2 early road tests going on. Even if they start Mikey Keene, they have 2 early road tests that could be problematic for them. Michigan faces New Mexico, at Oklahoma, Central Michigan, at Nebraska. So you're looking at a situation here where it's not unlikely that Michigan would drop one of those 2, and it's also not completely unlikely that Michigan might lose both of those games as well. But even if they do lose, I don't see 3 more losses to get them to 7-5. Listen to the rest of their schedule. You tell me where the 3 losses are in here, where Michigan has just done a lot in the transfer portal, improved their roster, brought Bryce Underwood in, and they're probably just going to keep doing stuff in the transfer portal with how much money they have. You tell me where the 3 more losses are here. Home against Wisconsin, at USC, home against Washington, at Michigan State, home against Purdue, at Northwestern, at Maryland, home against Ohio State. At this point, I mean, Sharon Morris beat Ryan Day. So at this point, I feel like I can't do anything but give Michigan the win, especially being at home. That's not a guaranteed win by any means, rivalry games, all that stuff. But you know what? He's done it. He's done it the past 2 years, and he did it with one of the biggest, point spreads that's ever been in that game. So I'm just going to give him the win on that one. I don't see even 2 other losses in here. At Maryland, at Northwestern, okay. At Michigan State, probably, but I wouldn't pick it. Michigan State's doing some good stuff in the transfer portal, but I don't know. I don't think it would happen, but like I said, it could happen. At USC is probably your other one there. You're probably looking at a situation where you would need Michigan to lose to at USC, at Michigan State, and home against Ohio State. And they would need to lose to Nebraska and Oklahoma. I don't know, guys. Just doesn't seem super likely to me. I think they probably split that at Oklahoma, at Nebraska. It's very possible they lose both of those, but I think they probably split those 2. I think they probably lose 2 or 3 conference games, but if they split those other 2 and then they lose 2 or 3 more, you're looking at a situation where they're 8-4 at the very least. So Michigan probably improves their record. Moving on from there, Michigan State. We just talked about them a little bit, but Michigan State, they have a pretty easy non-conference. Western Michigan, Boston College, they get at home after giving them a good game last year. I think Boston College is going to regress from this last year. I think Michigan State's going to get better. So, and then Youngstown State as well. Michigan State was 5-7 this past year, 5-7. So really all they need is 3 more wins on top of those out-of-conference wins. I could see them beating UCLA, at Minnesota, Maryland. I could see them beating those. Even if they don't beat those, you could see a scenario where they possibly, like I said, possibly beat Michigan. It's at home. It's a It's a rivalry game. Anything could happen. They're going to play at Indiana. How much better did Indiana get? They were up on them at one point until Indiana just completely stomped them last time. At Nebraska, at USC. I mean, really all they would need if they beat UCLA, Maryland, which I think those are likely wins, and win their out of conference games, all they need is one more win. All they need is one more win. At Nebraska, is it possible that Matt Rule just drops the ball? At Minnesota is gettable. We'll see what they are next year. They had a lot of good players this year. PJ Fleck did a great job, but they're also not going to have Max Brosmer. That QB situation is in flux. We'll see what happens there. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Michigan State goes 6-6 or 7-5 possibly next year. I think they're going to improve from 5-7. Nebraska this year went 6-6, and they're out of conference. They have a neutral site game in Indy against Cincinnati, Akron, and then HCU. Is that Holy Cross? I don't know. HCU, it's an FCS team. So you look at that. They should win those 3 out of conference games, and then on top of that, Nebraska has some pretty favorable home matchups that they should be able to take advantage of. You're home against Michigan State, you're home against Northwestern, you're home against USC, and you're home against Iowa. Those are gettable home games for Nebraska. So you're talking about winning those 3 out of conference games and then winning 3 of those. That gets you at 6-6, and all you got to do is steal 1 on the road. And your teams that you're playing on the road are Maryland, Minnesota, UCLA, Penn State. Probably not going to win that Penn State game on the road, but Maryland, Minnesota, UCLA are all gettable. Minnesota's probably going to be the most difficult one there, but I could definitely see them beating that Maryland team on the road. Next one, that will improve Purdue. Geez, they went 11-1. I really hope they. I don't know how they won't improve. They've actually done a pretty good job in the portal. Here's my justification. You ready? They play Ball State and Southern Illinois. First 2 games of the season. You have got to win those 2 games. Now, Purdue will win those 2 games, but this was like the easiest pick ever. They were 1-11 last year. Now, I don't think they're going to do anything outstanding. Like I said, I do think they're doing a good job with the transfer portal class, but they do have a pretty difficult conference schedule. You're looking at your last 4 games of the season in the final 5 weeks at Michigan, Ohio State, at Washington, by home against Indiana. Like, if Indiana is even anything close to what they were last year, that is super tough. You're also playing Illinois, Notre Dame, USC, at Minnesota. Like, it's going to be a hard time for Purdue, but they should capitalize just based on Ball State and Southern Illinois. I feel pretty confident that they'll be better than 1-11. And then my final one is Washington. Washington plays an out-of-conference schedule of Colorado State, some FCS team. I don't even recognize that logo. And then Washington State, which that one says at Washington State, so they will have to go there. They struggled this past year. They should have won that game, but some interesting play calling at the end by Jed Fish. I think this Washington team, I don't think this Washington team is going to be as undisciplined with penalties and stuff like that, like they were last year. I think Damon Williams is a playmaker. I think he's going to do a lot of good things for them. I don't know if they are going to have the same kind of playmakers on the outside. We'll see. But actually, I don't even know if Josh Jackson and them are coming back. Anyway, but I do trust Jed Fish with offense. Jed Fish did a good job. He also brought in that cornerback, Davis, the number 1 cornerback in the transfer portal. I think that's really going to help solidify their secondary. So between those 3 games and then at Maryland, Rutgers, Purdue, at UCLA, like they should win 3 of those. Actually, I don't think it's completely unlikely that you could see Washington beat Illinois at home. That's a really tough road game for Illinois. Illinois actually has a pretty favorable schedule. They are a team that could improve their record. Like, no lie. I mean, and they went 9-3 this past year. They could improve their record. And by the way, guys, I'm only talking about regular season record. I'm not going to talk about the bowl games and stuff because I don't know who they're playing in the bowl games. So I'm only talking about regular season. But, like, Illinois, they play Western Illinois, Duke, Western Michigan, at Indiana, USC, at Purdue, Ohio State, at Washington, Rutgers, Maryland, at Wisconsin, Northwestern. I don't know if I'd pick 10-2. I don't even know if I'd pick 9-3. We'll see. There still are some tough games in there, like at Wisconsin and USC, at Indiana. But it's definitely possible you could see this Illinois team go 10-2. It's not impossible for them to do that. So that would be pretty crazy if they could. So those are my 5 teams that could. I kind of mentioned Illinois secondary. Like I said, I'm not really gonna pick that, but my 5 teams are Michigan, Michigan State, Nebraska, Purdue, and Washington. Now my 5 teams that will worsen their records, again in alphabetical order. Sorry, Indiana fans. 11-1 is just not repeatable with this schedule you got. Now you do have an easy out of conference. You have Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, Indiana State, so you're good there. But your next 3 games after that are a grind. You're home against Illinois, which is home, winnable game there, even with Illinois' improved roster and or bringing back so many players and everything like that. Still a winnable game because it's at home. But then you go at Iowa, bye, at Oregon, Michigan State, UCLA, Maryland. Those are all winnable. At Maryland, and then at Penn State, and then Wisconsin at Purdue. Now, Wisconsin at Purdue, winnable as well. You should win that at Purdue game. But, I mean, you look at Illinois, at Iowa, at Oregon, at Penn State, you're looking at only 1 loss in there. Like, I know Illinois is really good this year, guys. Don't get me wrong. But that's pretty crazy to only have 1 loss in there. So Indiana, they're not going to go 11-1 again. Iowa at 8-4, I could see being worse. They could go from a defensive-led team with all the players they were bringing back to more of an offensive-led team this year with Mark Gronowski coming in, Tim Lester in his second year looking a little bit better. I mean, you could see this Iowa team go 5-0 to begin the year and look really good offensively. But that's kind of the problem is you go 5-0 and then things get tougher. You're going at Wisconsin. We'll see how good Wisconsin is next year, but they've done a pretty good job in the transfer portal, so Luke Fickell could be doing a good job there. Penn State, Minnesota, Oregon, at USC, Michigan State, at Nebraska. That's going to be really tough to get that final stretch there to get more than 2 wins. At Wisconsin, Penn State, Minnesota, Oregon, at USC, Michigan State, at Nebraska. That's going to be tough there. So obviously doable. Kirk Ferentz is a good coach. He can figure some things out, but I still am waiting to see kind of what Iowa looks like without the West. They brought back all those players this past year, and they were rather disappointing. I think Iowa could struggle with the secondary again this year. No Jamari Harris. You don't have some of the safety play that you had from last year coming back, and that secondary already struggled this past year. So, struggled by Iowa standards. Okay, I don't want to make it sound like they were bottom in the Big Ten, but by Iowa standards, they struggled. All right, and then my next one, actually, guys, this is gonna sound super crazy. Maryland went 4-8 last year. I could see them being 3-9 this year. Here, I'm gonna be honest. And their out of conference games are 3 wins: Florida Atlantic, Northern Illinois, Towson. Like those are 3 wins. But I could also see them not winning a single Big Ten game. They're going at Wisconsin, Washington, Nebraska, at UCLA, Indiana, at Rutgers, at Illinois, Michigan, at Michigan State. Like your gettable games there for Maryland are UCLA, Rutgers, and Michigan State. You're traveling at for all those games. So, I mean, I think Maryland's going to go 8-0-9 in the conference? Probably not. But if they drop an out of conference game, if they drop a Florida Atlantic or Northern Illinois, which I know they never do, so don't come at me, Maryland fans, and say, "Oh, we're undefeated all this time," and yada yada. Well, at some point it's going to be broken. Who knows if it'll be this year or not, but at some point it will be. And you win one Big Ten game on top of that, like I don't know. I just think 4-8. It's an easy schedule to replicate, but when you have the easy record to replicate, but when you have all the schedule to get to, that's gonna be rough. So, all right, Oregon, they were 12-0 last year. I don't see Oregon going 12-0 again, and it's just really really hard to go undefeated back to back. Now they do have a favorable schedule in some ways. They're out of conferences: Montana State, OSU, or Oklahoma State, and Oregon State. So actually, they play two OSUs. That's interesting. Oh, if they played Ohio State, they'd play three OSUs. Um, Montana State, Oklahoma State, and Oregon State. They get all those games at home, so they should take care of those. They travel at Northwestern. That should be fine. No problem there. But then at Penn State in week 5, you're probably going to have Dante Moore starting this next year. It would technically be his second year starting, but it would be his first year starting in the Oregon system. And then you have Indiana at Rutgers. Wisconsin should win those. But then at Iowa, Minnesota, USC, and then at Washington. I don't know, guys. 12-0 is really hard to replicate, and you do have some tough games in there. So, Dan Lanning could do it. I'm not doubting the guy, but, if I had to pick a team that, is going to be a worse record than last year, I think picking the 12-0 team is probably pretty safe. And then finally, worst record than last year, Rutgers, 6-6 this past year. Too tough of a schedule. They were kind of gifted a good schedule this past year. Injuries, for sure, kind of hindered them, but they were only able to win 6 games. They do have a favorable out of conference. They're playing 2 MAC teams in Ohio and Miami of Ohio. They're playing an FCS school. And Norfolk, and then you have Iowa, at Minnesota, at Washington, Oregon, at Purdue, at Illinois, Maryland, at Ohio State, Penn State. That's a brutal schedule. 5 and 7 is probably what you're looking at there for Rutgers. They're going to go undefeated in the out of conference most likely, but with all those tough games there, I mean, you're looking at your gettable games are at Minnesota, at Purdue, and Miami, or in Maryland. Like, just doesn't sound like a great recipe. So those are my 5 teams. Again, my 5 teams that will most likely have worse records are Indiana, Iowa, Maryland, Oregon, and Rutgers. So let me know what you guys think. Comment. If you guys think there was a team with a record this year that you think will be worse record-wise, don't just tell me like there'll be a worse team. Like, look at their schedule and see who will have a worse record. I'd love to get you guys' thoughts on that and go from there. So thanks so much for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.